Women's rights in Afghanistan have oscillated back and forth depending on the time period as well as the regime in power. After King Amanullah Khan's attempts to modernize the country, in the 1920s, women officially gained equality under the 1964 Constitution. However, these rights were taken away in the 1990s through different temporary rulers such as the Mujahideen and the Taliban during the Afghan Civil War. During the first Taliban regime, 1996 to 2001, women had very little to no freedom, specifically in terms of civil liberties. When the Taliban was overthrown by the United States following the 9/11 attacks, women's rights gradually improved under the Presidential Islamic Republic of Afghanistan. Women were de jure equal to men under the 2004 Constitution. From the age of 8 onward, girls in Afghanistan were not allowed to be in direct contact with males other than a close blood relative, husband, or in-law from September 1996 to December 2001. When the Taliban were in control of 90% of Afghanistan, it imposed the following restrictions on women. The treatment of women by the Taliban refers to actions and policies by various Taliban regimes which are either specific or highly commented upon, mostly due to discrimination, since they first took control in 1996. During their first rule of Afghanistan, 1996 to 2001, the Taliban were notorious internationally for their misogyny and violence against women. In 1996, women were mandated to wear the burqa at all times in public. In a systematic segregation sometimes referred to as gender apartheid, women were not allowed to work, nor were they allowed to be educated after the age of 8. Women seeking an education were forced to attend underground schools, where they and their teachers risked execution if caught. They were not allowed to be treated by male doctors unless accompanied by a male chaperone, which led to illnesses remaining untreated. They faced public flogging and execution for violations of the Taliban's laws. Amnesty International conducted research on the situation of women and girls under Taliban rule from September 2021 to June 2022. Interviewing a total of 90 Afghan women and 11 girls. The ages of these women and girls ranged from 14 to 74 years old, and they lived in 20 of Afghanistan's 34 provinces. Amnesty International also interviewed 6 current or former staff members of Taliban-run detention centers, 22 staff members of national and international NGOs and UN agencies and mechanisms, and 10 Afghan and international experts and journalists. The research was conducted through in-person interviews in Afghanistan from 4 to the 20th of March 2022, as well as through remote interviews. This report describes a web of interrelated restrictions and prohibitions in which Afghan women and girls are trapped. It shows how the Taliban's violation of any single right can have pernicious implications for the exercise of other rights. Cumulatively, Taliban policies form a system of repression that discriminates against women and girls in Afghanistan in almost every aspect of their lives. On the 1st of July 2022, Amnesty International communicated the key findings detailed in this report in letters addressed to Minister of Foreign Affairs Amir Khan Muttaqi and Minister of Labor and Social Affairs Abdul Wali. No response had been received as of the 15th of July 2022, when the report was finalized. Since their takeover, the Taliban have issued a series of policies, decrees and guidelines that violate the human rights of women and girls in Afghanistan, including those related to education, work, free movement and clothing. It was nearly a year ago that television viewers around the world first saw the searing image of an Afghan woman, shrouded in her burqa, publicly executed by a Taliban gunman at a soccer stadium. Footage of the faceless, nameless woman shot dead in Kabul's Olympic Stadium was secretly smuggled out of Afghanistan by members of the Revolutionary Association of the Women of Afghanistan, a women's group. Before long, the images of the November 17, 1999, execution became an icon for female suffering under Taliban rule. But now the woman without a face has a name, Zarmina. She had actually been in prison for 3 years on charges of killing her husband. Zarmina had been brought to jail along with her 1-year-old twins, a boy and a girl, and for a while, she thought her children would save her. The 35-year-old mother of 7 was accused of murdering her husband, and her only hope was to be spared on account of her children. A hope fed by the Taliban declaring that until her twins were weaned, Zarmina would live. She kept repeating the same statement, and that was, "They're not going to kill me. They're not going to kill me. Who will look after my children? I'm a mother. They would not kill a mother." But Zarmina was wrong. Once her twins were weaned, her execution was scheduled. Though it had been announced on the radio days before, Zarmina knew nothing about her impending death. She was convinced her punishment would be 100 lashes. In fact, the morning of her execution she borrowed 2 extra dresses from fellow prisoners, and put them on underneath her burqa, hoping to soften the blows. In front of 30,000 spectators, Zarmina was made to kneel before the soccer goalposts. Thousands of people watched as a woman, cowering beneath a pale blue all-enveloping burqa, was shot and killed today in the first public execution of a woman in Kabul since the Taliban religious army took control 3 years ago. The woman, identified only as Zarmina, a mother of 7 children, was found guilty of beating her husband to death with a steel hammer as he slept. The reason for the killing 2 years ago was a family dispute, according to a Taliban soldier, who didn't give his name. Zarmina was taken from the back of a pickup truck that drove into the sports stadium. 2 female police officers, both in deep blue burqas, held Zarmina's arms. Witnesses said the convicted woman walked slowly, each step followed by pause. When she reached the center of the field, she was ordered by one of the women to sit. Behind her, a young Taliban soldier, his head wrapped in the traditional turban, took aim with his Kalashnikov rifle. But suddenly Zarmina stood up and tried to flee. A policewoman stopped her and forced her to sit, said witnesses. The Taliban soldier moved closer and shot her 3 times. Afterward, from the crowd, several people shouted, "God is great." The stadium was packed with men and women, many of whom had brought their children. One woman in a burqa, who did not give her name, but was running quickly toward the stadium seats pushing her small children ahead of her, said, "This is the first time a woman has been killed. I wanted to see." The Taliban have imposed their harsh brand of Islamic law in the 90% of Afghanistan under their control. The Taliban say their version of Islam is a pure one that follows a literal interpretation of the Muslim holy book, the Quran. Under Taliban laws, murderers are publicly executed by the relatives of their victims. Adulterers are stoned to death and the limbs of thieves are amputated. Lesser crimes are punished by public beatings. Thank you for watching Death Row.